totally agree with that. There's a 4-year cycle around the halving. Or maybe in the early days that might have been true. Narratives are powerful, so perhaps the narrative alone, like you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But in terms of the math, it never really made sense to me. And I think it was kind of a coincidence because a lot of the halvings seem to align with major liquidity events where, for instance, in 2020, obviously, they came out with the bazookas and printed 40% of the money supply in months. So, you had these liquidity dynamics, I think, is actually the main driver of Bitcoin's long-term returns. And so I think watching liquidity conditions is really important. That's like the piece that Lynn and I wrote last year, looking at the correlation of Bitcoin to the sensitivity to changes in liquidity conditions is a long-term price driver. But in that, we did talk about periods where that correlation starts to break down. And it breaks down when there's like an idiosyncratic event to Bitcoin itself. So it doesn't really matter what the Fed's doing with rates or whether they're running massive fiscal deficits and liquidity conditions are improving. If there's something catastrophic or happening in Bitcoin itself. Like if there's a major exchange blow up, FTX like event, Bitcoin's going to come under pressure in that scenario, regardless of what's going on with liquidity conditions. Similarly, if liquidity conditions are tightening, like the Fed's raising rates and liquidity conditions are tightening, Bitcoin was running, well, we had the ETFs launch. And so access to Bitcoin improved dramatically for large pools of capital that could finally get exposure to this asset class. That was a huge tailwind for Bitcoin's price, regardless of what was going on with the liquidity conditions. So it's not to say that it doesn't break down sometimes, but over the long term, it's what drives Bitcoin. It's basically the money printing, the fiscal side of things, and the amount of monetary units in the system drives up Bitcoin because it's a hard, scarce asset with a fixed supply. And it's not unique to Bitcoin, but Bitcoin seems to be the most sensitive compared to other asset classes like equities or gold.